Good morning, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Leaders Connect. Thank you very much for being with us and being a part of this journey of Arca leadership. We started this journey of Leaders Connect in January. This is our fourth episode, and today we have Shayamal Vallabhjee. But before that, before I get to introducing him, I will briefly introduce Arca leadership and our partners. Arca Leadership is a movement to inspire people to live with authenticity. We seek to really bring about a change or a concept of living and leading with authenticity is the way of life to being happy, excelling in your performance and well-being. We are a group of senior HR leaders, professional coaches who have experienced the benefit of living with our inner gut and are deeply passionate about leadership. Personally, I have an experience of 30 years with as an entrepreneur, leadership coach, author, speaker, and continue to be a student of life, journeying through discovering new layers about myself. I'm grateful to TOSB for Arca's vision and agreeing to be our partner. TOSB Conversations is an online platform with leading experts offering cutting edge perspectives and learning from their fields. The platform partners with global speakers and experts to facilitate conversations on pressing concerns and global topics such as boardroom philosophies, digital transformation, diversity, inclusion, and more. So, what is Leaders Connect and why are we here today? I have over the years, if there's one thing that has been consistently reaffirmed to me, is that there is tremendous goodness in everyone. And we lose sight of that within ourselves or in the world. And we keep seeking for this back within us. My vision is to inspire and empower the world to harness and unleash this treasure that exists in all by sharing stories and having dialogues with some of the most inspiring leaders from across the globe. It's a series of online dialogues with inspiring leaders who have deep dived into themselves and excel at what they do. Transformational leadership and successful leaders are who we seek to have conversations with on qualities such as authenticity, emotional intelligence, inclusion, trust, courage, compassion, and more. We aim to make this collaborative and exciting platform for leaders to connect and share ideas. Our outreach partners, Ascend Foundation is a not-for-profit expression by Mr. Harsh Marivara and his passion to identify high potential growth stage entrepreneurs to enable them to grow their expertise and enrich their entrepreneurial journey. NASSCOM Insights is the research division of NASSCOM, a not-for-profit trade association of Indian IT and BPO companies. The platform discusses the best of technologies and impact of policies and changing markets, monitor trends, interviews business leaders, and puts the spotlight on brilliant startups and ideations for collaboration between members. They have published various reports on navigating COVID in the Indian sector. Another partner, Shiros, is a women's platform, Community for Women. It's a safe and trusted space where members discuss health, career, love, and share their life stories, achievements, and moments. And now, Shayamal Vallabhjee. As- Each time I speak to him, if there's one thing that keeps coming back to me is we don't know enough. There is just so much to learn and so much to know. And he constantly humbles me with that. He's a South African born sports scientist with a master's in psychology. He's worked as a high performance coach. He works with cutting edge professionals in sports for the last 2 decades. He's lived as a monk at the Hare Krishna temple. He visits Buddhist monasteries, Japanese monasteries, and continues to passionately delve into this whole space of mindfulness and combines it with psychology and ancient spiritual practices to help his clients achieve peak performance and flow. He has worked with some of the top athletes in cricket and tennis across various acclaimed teams. He's an author of 3 books, a TEDx speaker, a men's health trainer of the year, and a passionate ultra marathoner. He very casually talks about running the 100-kilometer marathon. And just before we started this dialogue, he was telling me about a Japanese order of monks who walk 100 kilometers a day. So I don't know what it takes to build such endurance, but I think that's what we're really going to talk about: emotional intelligence and the practices that it takes to build, especially in a world where last year has shaken many people's foundation and tested their limits. It's been a year of acid test. It's been a year of humility. And it's been a year which has brought about an awareness in many of us. Peak performance, well, Shamal, requires tremendous endurance and self-awareness. And I would really like to know what has been your experience with leaders last year?
Ashuji, thank you so much for welcoming me to the ARCA Forum. Thank you to TOSP for putting this together. I'm thoroughly excited to be here. You're 100% right. 2020 has been quite a remarkable year. It's been a year in which people have gone through pain. They have seen the ups, the downs, they've earned money, businesses have shut, businesses have reinvented themselves. Some businesses have seen the most exponential growth possible. And there were things that made me happy about 2020. There were things that made me and continue to make me extremely sad about 2020. What I noticed throughout the whole experience is that some of the words, probably 2 of the words that were most associated with was a word called unprecedented and uncertainty. I think in every conversation over the year, we kept hearing those words, unprecedented and uncertain. And I'm someone who, I pride myself on being able to peel away the layers of understanding someone's psyche and what they're thinking. And every time I ask someone, so what is the uncertainty that exists that is creating so much of anxiousness in you? Everyone always talks about the various stock markets. They talk about the lack of stability in the family, emotional well-being, all of that. I rarely ever come across a person who says, I am uncertain about my ability to perceive the situation differently. And that for me was, it pointed me in a direction where we needed to give a little bit more guidance. You see, Ashuji, in every single situation in life, there's always going to be an external lens and an internal lens. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the world forces us to look at everything externally. And the problem is when you look at everything externally, spirituality tells us that we give our power to that external variable. Okay. And as soon as you start giving the power that you have within you to something else, then you become that victim to that. And then it's just a waiting game. You're waiting for that person to, or that situation to give you some pity or some empathy or sympathy for you to feel right. And that for me was really, really disheartening in the entire system. What was positive in the system was that, and I always speak very often about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm proud of the fact that in an Asian ecosystem, in an Indian ecosystem, we have tons of case studies where we flip Maslow's on its head. We don't need safety, physiology. We don't need all of those stabilities for us to self-transcend and help communities. And we saw that beautifully in 2020. We saw people not having everything, risk their lives, risk what they have to create a little bit of comfort and a little bit of stability for everyone else. So that was really one of the positive things that came out. But 2020 also rewarded a little bit of selfishness, isn't it? People, certain businesses grew because they looked after themselves and they did that. Certain people's wealth grew because they looked after themselves. And for those people, I generally ask them to pause, because there's never been an example in the world where selfishness has stood the test of time and the person's benefited incrementally. You may have made wealth, but have you grown as a person? And I think, fundamentally where we should start is by getting people to reflect on the type of person they want to. And I think once you can reflect on that, everything else will fall in place from there.
Yeah, it was very well said, Shamal. It was really a year of very extreme dualities.
Yeah.
We had, many dualities glaring in our face, and it wasn't a very pleasant sight indeed.
Yeah.
Yet I think it's a year which also forced many into, a space of reflecting on themselves, gratitude, relationships. There are some, I think every adversity does sometimes serve the humanity as well. And so has 2020. It's been a mixed year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, when you talk about actually, selfishness or such, are we really this whole facet of humanity where we get so focused on our idea of truth? And I'd like to take you back to your journey when you started out, before you started out as a coach. You were an avid sportsman with dreams to wanting to be in the front end and on the pitch. Apartheid, racism is something which glared at you in your face and turned your dream on its head completely.
Yeah.
How did you really cope with that phase? And you've turned your life around beautifully, of course. But I'll take the next question after you tell me how you turned it around and what that did for you.
So, Ashish, firstly, it was painful. Like all incidences that we go through, it was exceptionally painful. The reason why it was painful was because, firstly, I was a teenager who had a dream. And as every teenager is, we try to protect our teenagers. They're not ready to face some of the harshness of the world. And the problem is, what we try to protect teenagers against willfully in our own environment is nothing compared to the pain that a cultural ecosystem is going to bestow upon them. My parents, as much as they tried to prepare me, could never have protected me from the pain of an apartheid, and when there's systemic discrimination in any shape and form, whether it's against women, whether it's against race, or whether gender preference, or whatever it is, it cuts a wound so deep, it's very difficult to heal. So the first thing is there was extreme pain. And what I noticed in my journey was that I was deeply blessed to have grown up in a very spiritual family. And I saw myself starting to become a person I really didn't like. And that for me was the first red flag. People who didn't even do anything to me, just by the sheer nature or the color of their skin, I was developing a little animosity towards them. And it wasn't great. And when I couldn't become a player, I transitioned to becoming a coach. And I was lucky enough to be given a position of authority very early in my life. And I realized that a person in power, a person with authority that's harboring any animosity is never going to be a good leader. So, I was blessed to have good mentorship in my spiritual masters at that time. And they were one of the pivotal people that asked me to pause and reflect on the type of person I wanted to be. And that's why I moved into the ashram, right? Because really and truly, I learned, and my mom and dad always tell me this, is that nothing in the world should be said if it cannot be said without love and kindness, right? So I needed to see where I can find that again and get that back. And that was the journey that I went in. But I learned something really important. And I think for everyone listening here, you should know this. It's not possible to go from anger to love. It's not possible to transition from the person who is discriminating and giving you a lot of pain to wake up the next morning and love that person. That's not how emotions work. The topic we're talking about is emotional intelligence. And I learned very early in my life that emotions have an arc of transition. So first, pain needs to come to acceptance. You need to accept your emotions and accept the situation, right? Once you have acceptance, then you move to forgiveness. You forgive yourself for carrying that, for bearing the burden of those emotions, even though you're a victim. You see, the victim must forgive himself for carrying those emotions first. And then forgiveness moves to gratitude, where you see that pain actually has made you a better person. And then gratitude becomes love. So you go from pain to acceptance, acceptance to forgiveness, forgiveness to gratitude, gratitude to love. And you have to understand this arc because the practices that move you to each station are completely different. And when you understand how to go there, you understand what to do to move you from one point to another. And this is fundamentally what I started practicing. And it took me a very long time. It took me a few years to move on that arc. But the beauty of this entire process is that when someone understands the arc of emotions and the practices that move you, Ashuji, you will live a life that is fearless from that moment on. Why? Because you will never fear someone hurting you, because they can do whatever you want to you, but you know how to heal yourself. Okay, so the greatest gift you can give yourself is to pause and reflect and teach yourself how to heal your own pain.
That is so beautifully said. Having the power to heal ourselves is the best gift we can give to ourselves. And how do you teach this to the leaders, or how do you impart this wisdom to leaders that you work with?
So, empathy, understanding, awareness, they all are skills that need to be cultivated. The first skill I teach a leader is awareness, right? I ask him, and through processes like, for example, a check-in exercise every single day, I ask him, check in once or twice in the day, notice what you're feeling, absorb what you're feeling, understand these emotions. Right. Once you have awareness, the second part of that awareness is expression, to be able to communicate what you're feeling with kindness, empathy, and conviction. Right. So these are the two elements that come together when it comes to understanding your emotions and communicating your emotions. But there's beautiful research that shows us something about empathy. There are different types of empathy. The first type of empathy is intellectual. So I intellectually know that this person is going through this situation, and I understand his pain. The second is emotional, where the person is close enough to you and you really and truly feel that pain. And the third type of empathy is actionable, where intellectual or emotional converts into action. Okay. Now, this is what I tell all leaders. There's unequivocal data to support the fact that an empathetic leader is the future of tomorrow. But there's also research to show that empathy requires mind space. Okay. There's research to show empathy requires mind space. What does that mean? That means that if you have a day that is packed, meeting after meeting after meeting, if you're rushing from one place to another continuously and you have no mind space, then you do not have a moment to pause and reflect. Without that moment to pause and reflect, empathy will always elude you. So the first question that someone should ask is, do I have enough moments of stillness in my day to reflect on my thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions? Without that there, empathy will always elude you. So the first step for any leader, right, whether you have empathy or don't, whether that empathy is actionable or not, the first place to start is find pockets of stillness throughout your day. Those pockets of stillness will start being filled with the things that best represent who you are, and they'll start being filled with what you want to give to the world.
It's something like pausing is something that I also always tell my clients to do. A 5-minute pause, a 10-minute pause is something that's so critical to center us and bring us back to our creative, empathetic, our true self. And, on dichotomy is, or ironically, we live in a world where we are taught to be in action at all times. There are people who are proud of being able to work 20-hour stretches and being on that treadmill. And they find it the hardest to digest this philosophy, which, although is ancient and standing the test of time, yet it eludes many. What do you see as the highest barrier to creating self-awareness and emotional intelligence in people?
That's a phenomenal question. Firstly, the reason why people are stopping is because there are two types of people. One is chasing something, and they're chasing something and they're listening to people who have got it externally. So you're looking at a person who's achieved $100 million company, and you see what they're doing and you're chasing that externally and you're not pausing internally. But there's something interesting which I tell all my CEOs who are highly successful. I said, without a routine or a process of stillness, right? I'd like you to absorb one thought that whatever you have in the world, whatever that quantum of money is, whatever the size that your bank account is, whatever it is, that is 10% of your potential, irrespective of that quantum. Don't get distracted by the number. If you don't have any moments of pause or stillness to reflect inward, to strengthen your inward, no matter what you have in the world, you've only tapped 10% of your potential. Okay, now this is fundamentally where we got to get people thinking and get them to realize that, if you get distracted by what you have, you'll never unlock what you potentially could have. Okay, and that can only come from really and truly from stillness. So one of the biggest distractions in a corporate world, for example, is we reward the wrong things. We reward time put in when we don't reward quality. For example, we got to reframe what we're rewarding in a system. And when we reframe what we're rewarding, the system will then in tune give it back. For example, we've had probably must be hundreds of thousands of talks on emotional intelligence. You have Buddhism and Buddhist teachers talking about stillness of the mind. There's probably, I think, whether you go in business or whether you go in self-help, the word meditation and mindfulness is a part of that book in some shape and form. Okay. Now, if every book is telling you this, I'm yet to come across a business system that rewards an employee for pausing. Now, you understand? So if you've not created an internal reward system for a process, how can you be upset that they're not imbibing that process? If you are rewarding them for working 14 hours a day, if you're rewarding them for staying on the conveyor belt and chasing it, how can you be upset that we are not pausing or stilling? Now, so there's a massive dichotomy between the knowledge that's available and the systems that I put in place. And it requires really strong governance and strong leadership to understand that taking the road less traveled to put in place a system that will yield a higher productivity and a better type of person later, is needed. So that's the problem. It's the reward systems we have in place are just wrong.
No, I totally agree. It requires a tremendous systemic shift and a perception change, which I think if I look at 2020, people have become a little more aware of the fact that it's not just about tasks, it's about people and well-being. And I hope that stays. I hope that again.
Yeah, Ashiji, you're saying it perfectly. And this is such a beautiful discussion. I mean, you come from the world of HR. 2020, leave the negativity. Let's look at the positivity that 2020 gave. 2020 showed us, listen, that human connection is important. It taught people to set personal emotional boundaries. Listen, don't spread your energy wide and then focus on where you need to give. It taught people to really focus on their strengths. It taught people to heal their body and take carved time away. It taught people the importance of meditation and stilling the mind. Now, what has happened is you're going to hire this individual who's learned all of these lessons through the pain the universe has given him, and you're going to inject him into an ecosystem where he's going to work for you for 10 to 12 hours a day, and he's not going to have a minute to put any of this into practice.
Because you're back to trying to make him catch up for what's the lost time, unfortunately.
But the problem is this. I was once talking to a beautiful astrophysicist, and he told me something really powerful. He says, no matter how strong you are, if you take a stone and you throw it up into the sky, it can only defy gravity for a certain amount of time before it has to start flowing with the force of the earth, right? So for example, right, What are the energies of the planet? The energies of the planet is human connection. It's love, it's kindness, it's gratitude. A company that forces an individual against the forces that are natural, against the grain, will not be able to sustain for a long period of time because it's unnatural. It's the laws of physics. You can only defy it for a long time. The problem that happens is that we don't look to build an organization for 100 years. We look to create successful momentarily for the 5 years that we are there. That is the fundamental problem.
Yeah, we are looking at short-term rewards versus long-term sustainable legacies. I have a question. I'll take a pause a moment here for a question. I have a question from Kriti Makija. Is it about empathy or compassion for leaders?
Well, they're both, isn't it? Compassion is going to stem from your empathy.
Yeah.
If you don't have empathy, if you can't, empathy is the ability to feel what someone else is going through. If you can't connect on that level, compassion, which is the actionable of it, won't kick in at all. So you can't make an unempathetic leader compassionate, right? And there's a massive difference, and this is where the lens gets a little blurred. In India, we have something called CSR, where companies are mandated to give 2 to 3% of their turnover, for example, to corporate social responsibility. And what happens is that is a mandatory amount that they have to give. Don't confuse that with empathy. That's mandated. You understand? For me, in the world of sport, I say it's the unseen hours that pay. What does that mean? Unseen hours that pay means that if a team practice is 4 hours, it's every minute after 4 hours that counts, right? So if I take that lens and I superimpose it into corporate world, right, and I say it's the unseen hours that pay, then it's every iota of empathy that overrides what is mandated by law.
Yeah, you've said exactly what I heard. Even, I was listening to a talk by Dalai Lama, and he said compassion is empathy in action. And unfortunately, we stop at the empathy element and we don't always translate it into compassion by actioning out that empathy.
Actually, we don't do this because somewhere along the line, we have thought, and this is the fundamental reframing that needs to happen in the corporate world, is that compassion is not a weakness. Vulnerability is not a weakness. Authenticity is not a weakness. Love is not a weakness. Kindness is not a weakness. And somewhere along the world, something happened and we were taught that all of these are weaknesses. And as a result, you get people move up. The people who are in the most pain are the people who are protected by the four walls of their corner office. Because they are not just scared of their pain, they're scared of everything underneath them. You understand? And until you don't break these walls down, right, until you don't get them to realize that these are not weaknesses, these are strengths. We build commonality through vulnerability. If we don't realize that, right, we're going to stay on this exact same conveyor belt for a very, very long period of time.
Yeah, we shun away the biggest gift of being human, and that is absolutely true. You are talking about, moving to our next a question of, there's a lot, sports lends a lot to peak performance. So on the one hand, you're talking, we're talking about stillness, we are talking about compassion, love, vulnerability, authenticity. On the other side, you're talking about peak performance. How do you bring the two together for people?
Great question. Great question. For me, performance, by the way, is to have a competitive advantage in a high performing environment. That's it, and this is where I start with people. I tell them, listen, if you do not have a tangible skill that's going to give you a competitive advantage in a high performing environment, you need to go back to the drawing board very, very quickly. Okay, because that's the driving anchoring pillar that's going to help you find success in a peak performance environment. Now, I work at the forefront, and there are a few important lessons that I've derived from the world of sport, which I don't see too much in the corporate world. right? One is that every sportsman sees himself as a student of an art, right? We're always students. You know, I call myself a student all the time. 20 years later, I'm saying I'm still a student because why? A student is invested in the growth journey. But more than anything else, you know, students are happy to make mistakes. We brush our failures off and we move on. Once you start thinking I'm a professional, then you have the burden of expectation on you. You have the burden of always being right. And that's such a phenomenal weight to be carrying. Right. So the first thing athletes do very beautifully is whether you're Rafa Nadal or LeBron James or Virat Kohli, everyone sees themselves as a student. And we always have a teacher next to us who's the coach. Always, you know. So the second thing that's really important, right, is that you must understand that in the world of corporates, when someone does something, there's an expectation of a result. So as an HR person, you send someone for this amazing corporate leadership program. He spends 6 months, he does it. He comes back, the first thing he's expecting is a promotion, right? Why? I've invested this time, I've done this. That's very nice. But in the world of sport, you can work as hard as you possibly can, but there's no expectation. You know, you are preparing for an opportunity, right? We are practicing because we are hoping to maximize an opportunity when that opportunity arises. Because athletes know that there's no greater travesty on earth than getting an opportunity you're not prepared for. But they know that hard work is not something that entitles the opportunity. You know, and we started off this beautiful talk talking about Japan, and I'll tell you, you know, there's a Japanese forestier, and in Japan they talk about growing forests, and there's something really beautiful analogy I'll give you, which I use in the world of sport when I coach even my corporate leaders, but my athletes mostly. A forest has 4 levels of trees. So you have shrubbery right on the ground, then you have your short bushes, then you have your mid-level trees, and then you have your canopy right on the top. Okay. Now, all the mid-level trees have the potential to be a part of that canopy that's sitting probably 20 to 30 feet higher than them. All of them have that potential, right? But you can't do anything about it. You have the potential, you can't. You have to wait for an opportunity. And one day in 50 years, 100 years, one tree will fall. And what will happen is a tiny peak of light will open in the canopy, right? And that light is a signal. That's the opportunity. It's a signal for those trees. Move. One of you will get it, right? You go. But remember, everyone's got potential. But potential and hard work doesn't guarantee opportunity. Sometimes it's a timing. But without the hard work and without the potential, you'll never be in a position to tap an opportunity. And athletes practice exceptionally hard because we know there's no greater travesty than getting an opportunity you're not prepared for. That, and then, you know, we are really and truly, we take full accountability and responsibility for every single thing. And, you know, I'll tell you a very, very quick story of this. This is a very powerful story. I was once sitting in the locker room and I was doing a little bit of work with Rafa Nadal's team, the tennis player. We were doing some rehab on his ankle and I was just guiding them. I wasn't part of his team. So he came in to strap his ankles and get everything set for him. And he came in an hour and a half before practice. Okay. And if you watch him play, he tapes all his fingers, right? And he goes on to the practice court, and within 2 minutes of just hitting a few balls, he comes back, he sits down, and he retapes all the fingers again. He removes whatever the physio's done, he's cut it, he removes it, throws it away, okay, and he tapes it up himself very quickly, and then he goes and he starts practicing for 2 hours. And the very next day at practice, he doesn't come 1.5 hours before, he comes 2 hours before practice into the physio room, right? And why is he doing that? He's doing that because he's not telling the physio, you did this wrong. He's telling himself, I didn't give the physio enough time to do it right. Massive difference in the mindset approach here. Massive difference in it. Right? So this is what athletes do. Athletes accept full accountability and responsibility. We don't blame others. The buck stops with us. We hold our power sacred to us.
So the whole game is about keeping the power to oneself rather than letting it frit away, blaming the world, blaming everybody.
Absolutely.
It's owning that power which is in all of us. I have questions pouring in, and I'm going to once again out a question. Shreya Pilani has asked if I'm in a happy space regarding my life, both personal and professional. Is it wrong to take a pause? Should one always be aspiring to go to the next level?
That's a phenomenal question. And there's friction in aspiring to move to the next level. Why is that? Because when you're aspiring for the next level, you're looking into the future. And when you start looking into the future always brings with it a sense of uneasiness, a sense of insecurity, a sense of instability. So anyone who's always looking into the future will have these elements there. But looking in the now provides a sense of comfort, a sense of ease, a sense of nourishment, a sense of protection, right? So we have to balance between the now and the future. That's what growth is. If you're always in the future, you will never be satisfied and you'll always be anxious. If you're always in the now, then you may lack the vitality, the drive, the grit to go and fully tap into your potential. And balance exists between these two worlds of having the gratitude for what's now, but having the grit to chase your potential. And there's nothing wrong with being content with who you are. But I often refer to this as from a very spiritual lens. I say, as human beings, we've got the highest form of intelligence from the 800,000 odd species that exist on this planet. We are blessed with a prefrontal cortex and the ability to innovate. We are blessed with free will. Okay, so I'm saying but not every human is blessed with certain intellectual skills. So it's important for you to peel away the layers of your potential, provided your potential is not putting you at the center of the world, but putting the world at the center of your skill. Very, very important. That's the secret to life. Put the world at the center of your skill. And then that aspiration and that grit no more becomes consuming, it becomes empowering. All right, I'll just repeat that one more time. When you put the world at the center of your life and you think, how can I make the world a better place? Then the power, the pressure, the grit, whatever you have doesn't consume you, it inspires you. It becomes like rocket fuel that moves you forward. But when you put yourself in the center of it, it'll eat you up. It'll consume you.
Yeah, we are allowing our ego to take over versus serving the world, which is what we are here for, all of us.
Exactly.
We're all here to serve because there's so much we are blessed with. And I think we lose sight of the blessings we are bestowed with when we are born as a human being.
Absolutely.
Now, that's what, that's really what Arka is looking to do, is bring out this facet of there's so much we have on this planet and so much to be blessed and grateful for. How can we really harness it and make it a better place for everybody? I have another question, Shamal, from Farah Qureshi. Emotions play a very high role in peak performance. How do people manage their emotions when they are going through emotional turmoil in their personal space? How to balance and switch yourself and come to work with the same passion?
Yes. Most people who are going through emotional turmoil are going through emotional turmoil because you've given far too much power to someone else. That's the reason the turmoil exists. Okay. And you bring your power back in yourself, and then all of a sudden you start managing your emotions better. But at the same time, I'd have to say that, listen, we are human beings and it's quite normal for our emotions to ebb and flow, right? And what you need to do is you need to honor, you need to respect, you need to acknowledge, you need to appreciate those emotions, and you need to learn the lesson that pain is trying to teach you. You see, a situation will continue to present itself, right, as long as you don't learn the lesson that you need to from that pain. Okay, so if you're in a situation, and this is what I do with my athletes, if they find themselves in a situation, I can't expect them to go out there and perform optimally if that situation is present. So what we try to do is we try to acknowledge that situation, appreciate it, learn the lesson we need from it, grow from it, and then move back into it. You cannot perform, right, if you are dealing with something. And one of the simple examples I give to you is this. Think of your body and your mind as a classroom, and imagine you're a teacher and you walk in, and the class period that you have to teach is 45 minutes. But the first time you walk in, that class is absolutely filthy, right? So you and all the students decide that we can't learn in this environment, we're going to clean it. Now, if that room takes 35 minutes to clean, you've got only 10 minutes to teach, isn't it? Now, cleaning is healing, is detoxifying. Teaching is optimizing, right? Now, the more time you spend in cleaning, the less time you have in optimizing. But you can't optimize yourself in an environment that needs to be cleansed first. It's not possible. So this is why it's so important from a peak performance mindset point of view, is to look at how do I keep all my environments, my spiritual environment, my mental environment, my body being my physical environment, my social environment, the people I'm interacting with, how do I keep them as clean, decluttered, and as optimized as possible, so that when I step into that environment, every iota of my energy is going towards growth and performance. Right. The more distractions you invite into each of these environments, the less time you have to optimize yourself. And that's the yin and yang of healing and optimization and peak performance.
Thank you for that very sound advice, that you do need to step off, heal, and only then can you optimize. It's really back to the pause and not staying on the treadmill at all times.
Yeah.
Your recent book, Shamal, on Breathe, Believe, Balance,
Yes,
is also touches upon tips and tools on how your life and look into various relationships with food, with fitness, the mindset, and external relationships. Any thought, if you could just share in brief a bit about each one.
Yeah, sure. The balance model talks about body, mind, relationships, and environment. Okay, so the first one is body, is your training and your nutrition, for example. And my best piece of advice is try to, and this is coming from someone who's worked in peak performance and biohacking for 20 years. We live in a world where it's very difficult to trust the sources of a lot of stuff that we're eating and consuming, especially if it's processed, especially if it's supplements. So try as hard as possible to live in alignment with the 5 elements, which is earth, space, air, fire, water. And how do you do this? Earth is eating more plant-based foods grown from the earth, organic foods if you can. Okay, if you can cook in earthen pots, so clay pots or matti pots, so drink from that's even better as well. Water is eating, not just drinking water, but eating water-rich food, so foods that release water. In fact, 60% of your hydration should come from eating water-rich foods. Okay, the sun is really the most healing force there is. So, we should be spending 45 minutes at least in the sun to absorb that energy. But other ways that you can absorb energy at the sun is sun gazing, sunbathing. And if you really want to do something beautiful, is plants have a beautiful affinity to absorb the energy from the sun. So leave your vegetables out in the sun, then wash them and just don't overcook them. Leave them for about an hour. Yes, they will wilt a little bit, but that's perfectly fine. That wilting is not a sign of anything else except that it's absorbing that beautiful energy from the sun. Okay. Space is fasting. Fasting, incidentally, is probably one of the most common practices across every religious faith on the planet. Okay, it's found in there, and fasting is a form of detoxification. It's a form of elimination, which is what I'm saying. If religious practices and spiritual practices have inculcated in it a elimination practice, it's showing us that once again, healing, elimination, detoxification is essential for optimization. Okay, and then the A is really your breath work. We know through pranayama, for example, breathing in can help bring your doshas into alignment, can help stimulate the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So that's really important. In alignment also with the body, I think it's something really important tip I'd like to give everyone is that everybody tries to go to the gym and push themselves. As a standard rule of thumb, 30% of the time that you spend in the gym, you should dedicate towards recovery, which means stretching, taking ice baths, getting massages, getting good sleep. Don't compromise on your recovery tools because your body will eventually break down in some shape and form. Okay, when I talk about the mind and I talk about mindset, I think probably one of the interesting things I can give you is try to find a little bit of awkwardness every day. I tell my athletes, awkwardness precedes growth. When you're feeling awkward about something, get excited because if you pursue down that line, you're going to grow, right? So awkwardness precedes growth. So I tell everyone, try to find something in the day that makes you awkward. It could be a conversation, it could be an exercise, it could be something that you do, and then with relationships, I think one of the best pieces of advice I could give someone is have the courage to have conversations that matter. The world is full of people that want to sweep things under the carpet, people who don't have the strength and the courage to have conversations that matter. Conversations that matter are going to either eliminate you from a system or find clarity that allow you to flourish in a system. Conversations that matter, tough conversations, is probably one of the best ways to heal relationships or get out of toxic relationships. But you got to find the courage to really do that. So these are some of the few tips and tools. This is my book. It's called Breathe, Believe, Balance. These are some of the tips and tricks that I talk about with respect to healing and understanding and optimizing the body and mind, and also finding purpose and self-transcendence through this process.
Thank you so much. Yeah, when we are anchored and aligned, we can really perform at our best. Absolutely. I have a flurry of questions, Shamal. So I'm going to, I think, have to put my questions aside and take on the other questions. I have a question from Spriha. Is there a way a person can be a judge of one's own potential? More often than not, people are either expecting too much from themselves or they're in the blind spot. How can one understand one's potential?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because we're always evolving. Your potential that you had 6 months ago is different from the potential that you have today. And that's the beauty of the human body and the human mind is that we're exceptionally resilient. But I'll tell you one thing is in the world of sport, we have the Bannister effect. I think it was 1954, Roger Bannister ran the 4-minute mile for the first time. And, for those who don't know the story, Roger Bannister was not the closest person to breaking that mile. Right. It was actually an Australian by the name of John Landy who was very close. But Roger Bannister pushed forth and he broke the 4-minute mile for the first time. And what happened after that was within 2 months, John Landy broke it. And now we have thousands of people who can run a mile in under 4 minutes, which was believed to be the upper limits of human performance. Now, why do we call this so important? And it's called the Bannister effect, is that when you see someone who's achieved something, you can have conviction that it's possible, and when you know someone else has done it, then that means you can do it as well. So when you want to understand your full potential, understand that, look at what you want to achieve and look at the high achievers in that field. And don't get jealous of them, but be grateful for them for showing you that whatever you dream is possible with a little bit of hard work, with a little bit of conviction, with a little bit of courage. Okay? And what I've realized is that when you live a life in alignment with your core values, right, you will live a highly fulfilled life. Success without values will equal achievement, but achievement is very hollow. Fulfillment is when you achieve whatever you want to in alignment with your value system. So to answer Spriya's question, one is that if you want to be a true peak performer, you can look at the gold standard that someone's achieved and you can remind yourself that that's possible. But you can achieve the same level of internal comfort by working and achieving even 20% of that, but achieving it in alignment with your value system. Okay, so for example, if your value system is integrity or authenticity, right? Working for an employee that allows you to express that respects you, that allows you to be the type of person you are with the freedom to express how you feel is important for you. Because why? If your value system's eroded, you'll never feel fulfilled no matter what the salary is. So there are two ways to tap into your potential. One is the banister effect if you want to really be a peak performer. Otherwise, just look at how to live a life in alignment with your value systems, and you'll sleep very well every single night.
So I think the acid test is, am I having a good night's sleep, and am I happy with myself, or am I always chasing that illusory goal which seems to be out there?
Totally. That's a very good acid test. Am I having a good night's sleep? Am I content when I get to bed?
Yeah. Uh, there's another question from Sridhar Govindan, empathy versus conflict resolution, how to handle, because after the pandemic, there is bound to be a lot of conflict while dealing with anybody. At the same time, we need to show empathy.
Yeah. Empathy is being aware of someone's emotions and being aware of what someone is going through. Let's peel away the layers, Sheila. How will one become empathetic? Right. You can become empathetic by seeing the plight of someone, but that's at a very distant situation. So you can see, for example, we see what the farmers are going through, we feel empathetic to them. But when you bring the lens a little closer to the people within your ecosystem, right? The true way to empathize with someone is to be a good communicator. And the foundation of good communication is actually listening, right? So the more we can listen, the more stillness, the more we absorb, the more we give a person a chance to speak their mind, right? The more likely we are to empathize with the plight of them, and the more likely we are to convert that empathy, as the Dalai Lama says, into actionable compassion in some shape and form. So I always say that conflict can clarify if good, effective communication is at the forefront of it. And good, effective communication has a few variables to it. A is awareness of your thoughts, emotions, feelings, and being in control of the tone of voice and the words that you're using to express what you want to. So awareness plus effective communication are two variables for communication. And then the third variable is being an intuitive, mindful listener, truly being emotionally present and listening to that person. If you do these three variables, then conflict doesn't erode a relationship. Conflict will clarify and be the springboard for growth in a relationship. Without these things here, you can rest assured, you can take this to the bank, that without emotional awareness, without intuitive listening, without being in control of your tone of voice and the choice of words you use, you will very quickly erode all the dignity in any relationship. This is a guarantee, right? So if you want to make conflict clarify, if you want to make conflict the stepping stone for growth, these are the things you need to do.
You know, Shamal, you hit upon these questions. If there's one thing it's bringing alive, is how we tend to avoid or run away from confrontations and conflicts rather than accepting those as stepping stones for growing.
Yeah.
I think if we really see that as a stepping stone for our own growth, we can embrace such situations and actually see how centered, and all those tools you mentioned about effective communication, awareness, intuitive listening. It's a self-assessment to say, where am I on this and how far do I still have to go?
Yeah, exactly.
I have the next question from Path Karwat. What can one do when the family members do not know how the working member is balancing busy and hectic work life and personal life? They're not wrong in looking at things from their perspective because they're not a witness to the working member's routine.
Yes. Well, every single situation in the planet has multiple perspectives to it, and people are always looking at it from one or two perspectives. Now, the question you should be asking is, what can I do within my power to make them see the situation from my perspective? How can I cultivate empathy for myself through communication, right? So you can't expect someone to just watch your life and assume that everything that you're going through or feeling everything that you are. Take responsibility of it, and take responsibility by communicating how you feel with kindness, with compassion, with love. Try to create space to have those conversations. The second interesting thing that I always tell people, and you can bring this through in communication, you know, the Western world seems to always want someone to be right and someone to be wrong. And for someone to be right, someone must be wrong. But in the world of spirituality, we say something really beautiful. We say two opposing truths can coexist, right? Which means, why can't you be right and I be right? You know, why can't 100 people be right? Why does one person have to be right and everyone else have to be wrong? Right. Now, how do you bring this into your communication? Well, this is a byproduct of practice. The more you start living in alignment with these words, the more you start communicating with compassion, with empathy, with love, the more people start understanding that this is who you are, this is how you see the world, and they start respecting how you see the world, and they start seeing the world through your lens. But if you live a life that has dichotomies in it, for example, you're expecting someone to be empathetic with you, but you are not empathetic to others around you, and they're seeing that there's such disparity between how you treat the rest of the world or your employees or your colleagues and how you treat your family. Disparity is going to create internal conflict. Internal conflict is going to erode respect and dignity and honor. Now, that's the problem. You have to bring everything together. You have to live in alignment with who you are. You have to communicate in alignment with who you are. And then the world will just, sing to your hymn sheet.
Yeah, the more authentic we are, the more the world falls in alignment with us. I think that's the secret we forget about, that we have to work on ourselves, not the world all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
I have a request from Vishal Shah. Can you share a good leadership story during this COVID time? And thank you, Vishal, for waiting patiently. I had so many questions. I decided to bring the question on the story a little later.
Yeah, good leadership question. I mean, uh, these are tough. I coach a lot of CEOs, a lot of good leaders, and so I'll give you one situation that I was talking to. I'm currently coaching a very big executive from probably a unicorn in Silicon Valley, and very senior position she is in. Okay, and I ask her, what do you want? She's 51 years old, and she's like, I'm really successful, and now I want to create a fund, and I want to start creating opportunities for people who are much younger. And, like kids from India. I grew up in India. I have made it. I have got all of this beautiful house in the Bay Area, and I've got lots of money, and I've got all of this. And I want to show people this life is possible. And I want to bring kids from villages in India across to the valley and let their dreams come true. So I said, I like that. Very interesting. But I'm going to pause you there for a second. And I know this information because I've been your coach for over a year now, and I talk to you every single week, minimum once, if not twice. I know everything about your life. I can tell you that your health is not perfect. I can tell you you're not sleeping very well. I can tell you that, you've not spoken to a family member in your life for at least a decade. Okay. I can tell you that you have a really, really rocky relationship with your partner. I can tell you you are upset about the fact that you don't get to spend enough time with the kids and you love them. I can tell you you're conflicted about whether to work where you are or start your own thing. So I said, I would be a great disservice if I didn't tell you that we need to heal all of this first and find a place of bliss before we fly a whole plane of young kids over. Because what dream are we actually selling them? Are you selling them that you can make $1 million but have this life that you have? or you're telling them a life that we can have a life of happiness and bliss plus have all of these things. And I said, when I safely get you to a place where we've healed all of these other elements, and I can truly see you are happy and aligned and living in fulfillment, right, with everything that you have, I'll be the first person who ushers people onto a plane from this side. And the reason I'm telling you the story is that, you know, as a leader, right, you always want to show people a few things that you've achieved. You want to show people a few strengths, right? But the truth is that, you know, you have to look at the balance of your life. You have to look at every element of your life, right? And see, you know, what were the sacrifices I made before I got there? Is this the life that I truly want? Is this a life that I'm truly proud of? Is this a life that I would like to represent? And as a coach, my job is to always hold up the mirror to my clients saying, listen, you know, the corporate world is built in such a way that it rewards time. The more time you spend in there, you will get more money, you will get more promotions, you will get all of those things. But happiness is something that requires hard work, you know, and that should be the first acid test before we do that. So, you know, heal yourself first before we look to try to do anything externally.
I call it like the bank. You cannot give a loan till you have a deposit in place.
This is true. Yeah.
Build your own deposit before you start wanting to give loans to people.
Yeah.
Shayamal, we are on the hour. This has been an absolutely profound and very fulfilling conversation. Any one line, one word of advice that you'd like to leave us with before we close the conversation? And I think I'd also like to ask, is there any question that I've missed? Please let me know. If we can take one, maybe just one last quick question otherwise.
Let me think. I mean, you know, so for me, as a person, as a human, as a coach, as everything, I try to tap into and lead my life through my intuition, through I feel. And, you know, physiologically, the gut has more senses, more neurons processing information there than the brain ever will. Okay, so intuitively, your gut feelings are very strong. And I think my piece of advice to everyone is, you know, you sent me a question earlier on and you asked me, you know, what is your definition of happiness? And I was thinking about it. And I think I wrote that down. I wrote down to have the confidence to listen to my intuition, to have the courage to act in accordance with its guidance, and to have the strength to accept its outcomes. That's my definition of happiness. And if I had to leave anyone with anything, I'm saying, try to work every day, peel away the layers to get to that point there. Because when you get to that point there, I can't guarantee your growth will be fast, but I can guarantee that you'll be fulfilled.
I absolutely echo that one. I have spent my last 15 years living totally in tune with my intuition, and it has supported me. And how I think the wake-up call was realizing that it had always supported me. I just didn't know it.
Yeah, this is true.
So on that absolutely, you know, very perfect note, I think I would say it's the perfect place to stop and say, keep listening to your gut instinct, stay healed, spend time. I think we've been gifted with time to heal last year. And instead of feeling restless about it, we should spend time building our gut and healing ourselves and being centered to take that, getting into that action, what you said, it's that optimizing action, really
Absolutely.
optimizing from there on. Thank you very, very much, Shayamal. It's been a fabulous conversation. I really appreciate the hour you've given us.
No worries. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody who's listening.
Thank you to TOSP for hosting us, and thank you to all the participants for being here.